You can never underestimate your competition. You have to give something your all. What can I do to differentiate myself? What can I do to say, hey, I know I can do the best job for you?
Welcome to the 2% Factor podcast, where we explore where small things make a massive difference and small decisions make a massive difference in someone's life, story, and journey. Please welcome Dana Lyon. She's the owner of the Refined Group. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I am too. It's good to have you here. For those that don't know, the Refined Group is a highly renowned interior design firm that Dana started and owns and runs here in Phoenix, Arizona. They create unique, curated spaces for their customers based on their lifestyle, and they do an amazing job. And today on this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about her life, her journey, where it started, how it migrated, and then how ultimately she got into interior design and created a very successful company in a massively growing city metro area as well. So we'll get into all of that as there's a lot going on here in Phoenix, Scottsdale area. So welcome. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
So let's start a little bit with, kind of your education and where you started your career, originally.
So I'm originally from the New York metropolitan area, like a suburb. And luckily, my parents were kind enough to take me traveling a lot. And I ended up doing part of my college in Ohio and the other part of it in England, which really transformed, I think, the way I think. So I would say that's probably the first 2% change that I had, just being independent in a big city like London and, finding my way through friends. And I was in an all-British school. So it was just a really profound experience, and the traveling that, you have as a college student, throughout Europe was just fabulous. I really transformed how I think.
I think it's a really interesting point because I look back on that as well. My dad was in the military, and I went over to Italy and different parts of Europe where he was stationed when I was kind of summers being 13, 14, and 15. And when I look back at that time, it had a huge impact on my kind of shaping the way I think, what I see, being open to different things. Right. It's funny. You don't really know that at that time, but I do agree with you. Like getting out as much as you can to see different cultures and experience it can have a big impact.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So you're hanging out in London and Ohio.
Right, two opposite ends of the stream. And then after college, I moved to the West Coast. And there was a huge technology boom happening there. There's the birth of Microsoft and Apple and Amazon and everything else. And I was working at the time for Condé Nast, which is a very large media company, working mostly with luxury goods clients on the marketing sales side of things, and really enjoying that. And at the same time, Wired started in its third issue. Condé Nast made a minor investment, and I went over and joined them, eventually becoming publisher, launching the first search engine. And that kind of gave me this rocket ship into technology, and along with that, it comes this lifestyle of all of a sudden there's this tremendous wealth like nobody's seen.
Well, and for those that don't know, Condé Nast owns so many of the big brand, media.
And I was working at Vanity Fair. I worked at Gourmet, which is unfortunately no longer, but a fabulous culinary travel. And, you're just exposed to so much. And I think what made Wired so special is not only was, on the zeitgeist of technology, but it also was extremely well art directed. And the art part of that was equally as important. So, and very entrepreneurial. And, I think that was also a turning point for me in a 2% way, in that it taught me to be an entrepreneur, like to have the guts to know I've got to go out and raise this amount of money. I have to really make this partnership work. Coming up with creative ideas of how to expand, let's just say, for example, you know, Apple's reach at that time, and how to showcase a brand like the Gap, which was at the time, extremely large. So just these partnerships working with luxury good people, we're creating basically a connection with people to the brand. And I think that is really important for any company.
So it's interesting. I actually was a subscriber to Wired back in those days, and
Oh, I bet you were. Yeah, you're right. The sweet spot.
yeah, I was right. I was right down your lane, being in tech and so many of the big brands. GQ. I think Condé Nast owns that as well, and Architectural Digest, and so many massive brands. And at that time, media was different, right? I mean, that's how people got access to news and what's happening and business inspiration. I remember subscribing to Entrepreneur magazine and all these different things. So I hear what you're saying in terms of you getting that firsthand exposure working at these places and seeing their stories of success and failure.
Absolutely.
How should we think about this? Is Condé Nast like a corporate umbrella, if you will, and you either work for corporate Condé Nast or you're in one of the lanes, in one of the brands of GQ, Architectural Digest, Wired?
I would say, the vast majority of people are in one of the lanes because you're kind of eating, living, and dying by that brand. If you're, and people tend to gravitate towards what's their love. They usually end up somewhere around that. And now I can see it from the consumer standpoint. Like I get excited when I get stuff from AD, Architectural Digest. I'm an AD Pro now, which I never was before, meaning you're recommended by them, which has been a great honor, to be on the other side of it. And you just need it. Everybody needs inspiration for their everyday life and their work life because everyone runs out of gas and you might be isolated in your workplace. And I think this is the beauty of the internet and such an amazing way is that you can almost get lost down the rabbit hole of stuff, where you're, if you're looking up, four poster beds or something, you can find amazing things, and then find ways to make it your own. And I think AI is also making that even more crazy, and it's exciting. I mean, we don't use AI as like the end meets all, but we'll oftentimes go down the rabbit hole just to see what something can be.
How do you find inspiration as the owner of an interior design firm and brand?
I mean, I think it's the world around you, and I think it's your clients. It's kind of a combination of those two things. The world around you is, and we were talking earlier about travel. Like, I try to travel at least, we make one international, possibly two, if we have the budget to see the world and pick a different place each time. And each time you learn something different. Like this past trip, we went to Spain to the Balearic Islands, and it was just really amazing to see, these fences that were made out of stone from, 2,000 years ago, 2,000-year olive oils. I mean, these are things that have both a history and a present. And the present is what are people doing today to bring these launch new hotels, bring hotels up to par, amazing restaurants. What are they serving to you? What's the tablescape look like? And it's amazing what's happening. That those two things combine together, and it just always gives you great ideas to go forward with.
I could see inspiration from some of the nicer places, even as I've traveled as well, but also from the local places and the family spots. And
No, it's the simplest thing. Might be a basket with all the napkins in it, and you just think, wow, that's such a beautiful way to store the napkins that you wouldn't have thought of.
What about times where you get in a creative rut? Has that ever happened to you, and how do you get out of it?
Of course, it happens to everybody. It happens to writers. It happens to. I think you just have to really like take time off. Take a breather, go for a walk, go do something totally different that's not at all related. So you have a chance to come back to it with a fresh mindset. I mean, I think all of us don't take good, as entrepreneurial people, don't always take good care of themselves. There's, the 10% factor that maybe that do, and they're amazing. But I think it's important to take, an hour a day to like focus your energy so you have it to give to your work.
That is such good advice. Because you're absolutely right. You get so heads down and you're not taking care of yourself. And if you don't take care of yourself, it's really hard to do the things that you need to do in order to run the business, give back, and grow. How long were you in media before you went over to creating your interior design?
I would say I was in there about 13, 14 years. And then, I started my design firm about 20 years ago, believe it or not. I'm aging myself out here. But and I just, don't know why you do things sometimes, but I just loved it so much that, I'd been studying it for so long. I had actually on my own been rehabbing homes in San Francisco almost every year and a half. I would buy a different home, fix it up. And I wasn't trying to flip it. Honestly, I was happily accepting any money I made along the way, but I wasn't my driving force. It was really getting on to the next place. And I was learning every time I redid these homes. So I did about 10 of them.
That's really interesting. You were wanting that because you wanted to do the projects.
Right, exactly. And I was enjoying the process. And, eventually I was making more than my day job, which was, a really great job as it was. And I just realized that it's time to go for this. I really should be doing this as a career. So at first I worked for a large architectural firm with many different architects there, speccing out interiors and learning some technology skills along the way and how things worked. I mean, I think it's good to almost like, I mean, it was almost like interning for me. I made some money, but not what I normally was used to making.
Well, and it really wasn't about the money, right? It was about the learning and experience.
Right, you have to give your academic time, so to speak.
You were paying for your tuition there in order to get in at that level. Was that an intentional 2% factor decision for you? Were you like, I'm going to do it and this is how I'm going to learn, from kind of the ground up, if you will?
Yes, it was, and because we were still building homes, and we were building one here, so I actually, went on board with the firm that was building our house at the time, which was great. It was a great experience. After that, shortly after that, I went on my own. Actually, strangely enough, I had a bad bike accident, so I was kind of out of commission. And, my clients that stayed with me and just were like, hey, we still like to work with you. It was amazing, actually. It was very heartwarming. And I, made a lot of friendships there and continue them to this day, which has been really great.
Really? So that's interesting. Something I didn't know that something had happened that time, and that's what was the catalyst for that transitional moment for you.
Well, Dan, I think you know this because you and I, I had the privilege of working on your home.
Yeah, you did an amazing job. Yeah.
You learn what's important to somebody, like how they want to live their life, what's important in their home. And you get really close to people. You watch their children grow. You watch sometimes their children be born, then you watch them have children. I mean, it's an incredible journey that the closeness and trust that you need to have between a designer and a client when it's right is really a great friendship and a lifelong friendship.
That is so true because when I think back to you designing my home and helping me after I bought it, all of a sudden you're in each other's lives like right away, and not only you, your team.
Yes, all hours of the day.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. Yeah. So it is really an immersive experience in a good way, which makes it all that much more important that you select the right group to work with. And probably for you too, it's probably more enjoyable, I got to imagine, if you enjoy your clients too, because you're in their home.
And then I do not want to leave out my team because I couldn't, I mean, there's so many things that I am actually very bad at, and, they say to hire people that are really good at what you're bad at. And I have never been that detailed paperwork kind of person. I just haven't been in that role. I've been in the higher, conceptual roles of what the idea is, not necessarily the execution. And I totally rely on my team for it. And they're great at it, just great at it.
Is that something you knew about yourself? The fact that you maybe had more strengths in strategy and vision and not as much in execution. Is that something you knew about yourself, back during your time in media, or how did that happen for you?
Yeah, I think I did. I think it's just like the roles that I evolved to. And it's like, that's where your weak links develop too. Like if you're not in that role, I mean, I hadn't gotten really technical training in CAD and the things that we need and use every day. I mean, now I have that from, I can read any document, understand what we're doing. But, you have to really stay on top of that. I mean, that's what I say. Like right now, I should probably be going to school for AI development. But it's like you can only have so many hats on at the same time for your business so you have to hire that expertise. And that's what we do where there's a hole, we hire and try to adapt to the times.
Yeah, that's great. And I definitely saw that with your team and people you've brought in, from recent graduates and interns and all the different, team members you brought in at different stages in their career too.
Yeah, and you try to hold on to those people. I'm sure it's any entrepreneur. If you know somebody, trust them, work with them a long time, you want them to stay forever if you can. I mean, no, that's not realistic, but it would be great if that could happen, is how I look at it. Like, how do I keep up with this person? Even if we might reconnect several years later. I mean, I have people that work for me that had two kids and then they come back and freelance or because they just couldn't do a long commute with two children, and I understand that. But it's our lives are a series of long-term relationships, how we connect with those people. And it's not always consistent. It might go off the radar for a while, but then it might come back on because you have a given need or they have a given need.
Let's talk a little bit about how did you start your business? Like, what happened at that time, and what were some of the key 2% factor decisions you had to make in order to jump into this next chapter of your life, a new career starting an interior design firm?
Well, I think the hardest thing for people is obviously the financial side of it. Making their first hires. Who's your first hire going to be? Mine was somebody who was very good technically, who had been in school, who was fantastic. Getting an office. It's the baby steps. I mean, my office, I remember like 1 month I paid for I bought a house and I converted it to an office. And 1 month I paid for the windows. Then the next month I paid for it was very slow getting the construction and everything done. But, I did it bit by bit. And I think that is when somebody loves something, you just don't even look at it as a pain point. You just kind of go, okay, now I can do this. I can grow by that. And then you add a person and then you add more people. And then you learn, maybe I don't want as many people. Or you're constantly shrinking and growing depending on market conditions.
Yeah, that's really, really good insight. You're absolutely right. Like understanding what's going on and when to ebb and flow, if you will, from a staffing standpoint to current market conditions, and then also seeing growth opportunity that's in front of you and when to double down.
Yeah, and when not to do something. I mean, I think in my line of work, a lot of people got hit by the e-commerce bug that they were going to open their own shops. Well, that's intense. I mean, that requires warehousing, fulfillment. It's just a lot of things. And like during COVID times, I mean, transportation costs got huge, so therefore your shipping costs got huge. And I mean, you have to kind of pick your lane. I've always just stayed strictly to high end design. That's like where I planted my stake in the ground. And, I've been doing that. Like yourself, I did a book and I did some other things, but they were all to support that effort. And I think where businesses run into problem or people run into problems is when they're trying to be 10 things, and you didn't really understand the scope and the challenges of having the other side. And it's changing on people. People who had retail businesses now, are going online. There's a combination of the two. And even the giants are struggling with it. I mean, the very big giants. So it's humbling, I find.
One of your points about the impact of distraction, it can take a business down and it can take a team down, and understanding what you just said about it's as important to understand what not to do as much as it is what to do.
Yes. Yeah.
When you look back at your experience at Condé Nast, what are some things that you ended up bringing into your new world, owning an interior design firm that maybe you didn't expect would end up having an impact for you?
A lot of what was happening, and I didn't even consciously realize that, is that I was studying how people live a better lifestyle. Like a lot of things that we were surrounded with is, how to make an amazing watch, how to have incredible fashion sense, how to have a beautiful room. I mean, all these things were kind of all around us. And in my life, I realized that I had been kind of gravitating towards that. Like my first job ever as a little tiny kid was at this high-end bakery, and I was making boxes and, putting these beautiful pastries in it. And then I worked in a cheese shop, which was just an amazing, a worldwide view, because cheeses are from all over the world. And then like why they make things the way they make. And I had all these weird jobs that were basically catering to people who wanted to experience, life at a very curatorial standard, at a very curatorial way. And I enjoyed that. I realized, wow, this is really interesting. Like how people are trying to make their lives better. And I still do that now. Like I think, okay, we're trying to build a gym, or we're trying to do, a wellness facility. And that, as you know, is changing. Like now there's, infrared saunas, there's, cold plunges. There's it's like when you look at it, you're like, wow, this has really changed. What makes sense? I had somebody ask me about, an oxygen room the other day, like, seriously. And those normally are in hospitals, it's like, wow, and it has been proven to do well. So it's like, how do we make our lives better? And now that has gone into the longevity factor, because so many people that own homes are baby boomers and they're trying to live
Longer, better, healthier. Are you seeing in the upper end luxury market that you play in, are you seeing a lot more requests for wellness, for steam rooms, saunas, the whole thing? Is that now a massive trend for you?
Yeah, just the square footage. People never used to say it used to be, let's have 8 bedrooms or something crazy, really, to be honest with you. And now it's like fitting in the other things that are going to make your life better, and maybe having, lesser bedrooms because of it. The other thing that, hasn't died down even the slightest is garages. I mean, people still love great cars, fast cars, experience with cars.
This for me is a major, like, like it's a pain point. I don't understand. I literally don't understand why there are 8-foot garage doors, 7-foot garage doors. I mean, I don't even, I feel like now you got me on this one. I really feel like the housing developers, builders are behind with regards to these tiny, garage situations with the size of cars nowadays. I don't get it.
Plus sports. I mean, I haven't even gotten into sports, but if you have, a rack in your paddle boards or, a large camping, you know, SUV type situation, they just won't fit. And all the stuff that comes with that. You almost need just a bay, dedicated to sports and biking, hiking, paddleboarding, you name it.
Well, if you look at like lifestyle, right? Lifestyle is active, healthy. People are getting out and they're moving and they're doing things. And when I look at garages, I feel like this is a hidden market. I'm telling you, like I feel like from an original home design standpoint, they're missing the boat on what it actually could look like to make it be completely different, bigger, better, more creative. I think I don't say I have a funny topic, but
Home builders, meaning clients who build, I mean, they know what they want. But these are experienced ones. Inexperienced ones, like anybody who's going through that process, to no fault of their own, think, well, the architect builder's going to know all this. And they really don't. By the time, even if the designer is leading the project, which is often the case where they'll build the team, it's still so important to spend time with people talking through, how they live their lives, what they want. You know, it's beyond budget. It's not like how many people are sitting at the dinner table normally, or are they even using a dinner table? I mean, it depends on the person. And, along with just building something for resale, which I think is less important, it should be building something for them to live in for 10, 20 years or however long it's going to be.
what are some of the more innovative or surprising or interesting things that you've seen people put in homes or want?
Oh boy, I got to think about that one for a second. I think the biggest trend for me is two kitchens. I know it's not surprising, but a lot of people will have like two different places that they're cooking.
By the way, welcome to Paradise Valley.
Yeah. Yeah, your house is probably a good example of that, where there's like kind of modes of the kitchen, I think, and the great room concept. But I think I like doing kitchens a lot, and I like to cook a lot. So I think having those two different places, one you might use with your kids to sit on an island and have breakfast in, and the other might be part of your entertaining space, near your dining room where you can get food out. Um, but it's a luxury for sure, but it's kind of a nice thing to have these parts of the home be kind of served up two different ways.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Kind of that in the ultra luxury market, right? Seeing that back kitchen, that expanded butler's pantry that becomes everything or second items of everything you have up front as well. I've seen that. That's interesting. What about, is there anything that what do you see that's upcoming when you kind of look over the next few years? Where do you see the industry going?
I think people want more athleticism in their life, more wellness in their life. I think that's going to be really, as I said before, just prominent. More safety, is your house air conditioning system working properly? Is it a good environment? I mean, I think that people are educated in that way now. Whereas, like, our parents maybe didn't question that stuff as much. And that's why, like, asbestos was popular, put in homes. But now there's, like, just an incredible amount of attention on the health of your home, materials, greenness, all that. I think bigger is not better. I think people are starting to realize, hey, I can't accommodate everything in my life. I can't have this giant house that costs X amount to keep up. I'll build something that's more reasonable so that I have money to do these other things. And I don't. that I look at that in the very wealthy as well. I think they're just looking at it like, I don't really want this responsibility. I think the 20,000 square foot home is you know, very, very hard to maintain. And I think people, even with the most amount of money, recognize that. You know, you can work on it can take you. I mean, you can't talk to people who are in another room because it's just too far away. You know, and you can't get there quickly, really, to be honest with you. And it overwhelms people eventually. You know,
That makes a lot of sense to me, what you said in terms of green, sustainability, security, and wellness.
and security's big. I mean, you know, we're living in a world where we have to, you know, pretty much set our alarms all the time, no matter where you are, really. I mean, there are some isolated instances, but you just have to be careful.
Let's talk a little bit about competition. Um, at Two Win, right? One of the things we do is help people with differentiating against the competition and these little 2% factor moments and decisions you can make as a business in order to put yourself out there in the way that you want to in order to compete at the highest level. Your market is extremely competitive, right? How do you deal with that and how do you differentiate?
I don't think anybody ever deals with it effectively because we might have 350 competitors. You know, many of them are very, very good. I mean, there's a handful of competitors that we regularly compete with. Maybe there's 12 companies that are, you know, in that echelon that we might be in, you know, where they're not single proprietors, so they have a team that can handle some of these things. Um, but you know, you just can't take anything for granted. And I think there's a magic to design that you know it when you see it. Is that if I'm hiring somebody and I say, do me a favor, show me what you would do in this room. There are some people who can do that extremely well because they love design and they're great at space planning. They're great at picking things that will look great together. It's almost like a chef. They know, you know, if you throw them 12 ingredients. And then there's other people who, quite frankly, just can't do that. And so those people have a different role. Those people have a role like, you know, maybe it's a technology, maybe it's a fulfillment role, maybe it's a. But I think there's a gift for people who are, you know, strong interior designers. You can recognize their things. I have people say to me sometimes, I recognize that you did this house when you walked in, and I'm amazed that they can do that. But, you know, they see something that I've done elsewhere and they go, oh, maybe she did this here, you know. It's interesting. So I think being true to what your brand is supposed to be. I mean, ours has always been in the kind of quiet luxury area. I very rarely do maximalist things.
Dana, when you talk about creative versus not creative and understanding what you're good at and what you're not, you're literally describing me and my son, where he can come into a space and he's incredibly creative and he looks at something and he sees it. I have no idea. I'm not wired that way at all.
But you know when something's right for you, you know. So, I mean, you were talking about competition, and I want to address that in that I don't think any of us in any one of our roles in life, you can never underestimate your competition. You know, you have to give something your all. Like if we're up against something, I just try so hard to think of what can I do to differentiate myself? What can I send them? And I don't mean things, I mean ideas. You know, what can I do to say, hey, I know I can do the best job for you. And, you know, because there's maybe two or three people who could all do a great job. And so if you don't go through those extra steps, secondarily, you're not always going to get picked. It's kind of like dating, you know. You're not always going to be the perfect fit for somebody. You just have to accept that you tried your hardest and then move on. You know, there's a lot of people and I think entrepreneurs have this. They're good at more than one thing. They're good at a lot of things. I mean, for somebody to turn into a leader, they have to have so many, you know, kind of long suits, I would say. And it's the same true in design. It is very hard out there. You have to, have your brand be front and center on Instagram. You have to constantly photograph your work. And that's an expensive, difficult process because you have to make sure everything's incredibly clean. You have to make sure the windows are done. You have to take your team off of whatever they're doing for 2 days and, style the place and take down the artwork that doesn't make sense. I mean, it's a lot of what you see in magazines, has been amazingly curated and is incredibly competitive. Because there are some magazines, and I'm going to give you one for example, Gallery Magazine, which showcases, fine arts and new collectors. There's 12 homes featured a year. It's now biannual. So, for you to get, if somebody has an amazing art collection, that's a great place for you to go. Because then you can say, okay, I can really show off this amazing art collection that this person has. But those odds of getting in that when you have both national and international competition it's decreasing daily.
I can imagine. I mean, such a opportunity to get in a publication of that sort. It's a big deal, and you've got to be elevated to a level in order to achieve that. And when you talk about competition, it's interesting. We just hired a vendor at 2Win. We selected somebody to help us, a consultant, and we got down to 3 potential partners that we were looking at. And through that experience, ultimately, as it was being narrowed down, all 3 of them were incredible. They all could very likely get the job done, get the outcomes we wanted. But what ended up being the differentiating factor on ultimately the choice to go with the vendor that we picked was we believed and we trusted that they genuinely heard us and cared about what we were really trying to do, not just where we're trying to get, but why we're trying to get there. And it's interesting to be on the other side of it, given this is also what we help our clients do, right? This is what we do at 2Win. And when I'm on the other side of it and we're selecting a vendor that we're going to pay and we're going to trust to help us move to the next step in this project that we're working on, it was really fun as a team to reflect about why did we choose them and how important ultimately the emotion around believing and trusting that they had our best interest at heart, and they were kind of a little higher. They built our confidence a little higher than someone else. And when I think about you and I think about the business you're in, I think that plays a huge role. Ultimately, there's a lot of people who can come in with very, strong backgrounds and a great eye and wonderful taste, and they can show you all the books and their websites. But at the end of the day, who do you trust? And who do you really want to put this big project in, because you're in each other's lives. It's something that you invest in. And I think ultimately that factor plays a massive role, and a lot of times people don't recognize it.
I agree. I completely agree. I mean, I think, a lot of times I'll say to somebody, don't spend money on that. They'll be like, I have to get this thing. And I'll be like, you can. I'm just saying that it might not be the best use of your money. And I think it takes courage to be able to be truthful with people, and honest. And, some people are open to hearing it, some people are not. And you have to read the room, right? You have to figure out what's really important to somebody. And if it is, you say, let's run with it. Let's take it down the football field.
I've been in Arizona now for, gosh, I think 6 years, 5 or 6 years. I'm coming from Seattle. And the growth in Arizona has just been enormous, right? It's moved from the top 5, 5th largest city in America, Phoenix area, to the 4th. It's grown on average 4% over the last 3 years, where the national average per state is 1%. Right? It's just have a massive influx of people coming in and people recognizing the Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, Phoenix metro area. How has that growth impacted your business and your opportunity?
I mean, I think it's been tremendous. I mean, on the one hand, it's been tremendous from a growth of sheer projects. On the other hand, it's been frustrating because availability. We don't have as many skilled laborers. I mean, and what I do, we try to pick out. I'm going to call it this Medici Italian, really craftsmen who are coming in and building your home, and those might be anything from framers that are great, that are building the walls straight, to people that are coming in and putting in your windows to make sure they're absolutely waterproof, and your tile people who are making sure your shower is waterproofed and it not only looks perfect, but it's bulletproof, because it has to be. The elements are so strong here. But getting good craftsmen is increasingly hard. So the lead times on things have really changed. Now, that might change this year if interest rates don't go down, if, but we still don't have a surplus of homes. I mean, and this is probably cyclically unusual for Arizona. There's been an 8-year pattern where things go up and down every 8 years economically, but that has not stopped. And I think it's because California is more expensive. A flock of, especially in the higher end zip codes, are, unhurt, really.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of space either when you look at kind of the certain pockets. A lot of the growth is going north and south, and also west, right? So there's a lot going on. Well, it's interesting. I got to think that would have a big impact in terms of all the growth.
It does. It does. And I mean, you said an important thing, like getting, to these other areas. The more, we do a lot out of town too. If we're working with someone and they get a second home, and that might be in a mountain community, that might be in a beach area. We do a lot of specific kind of second homes, which are really a joy. But you have to think through everything so well, and see if you can find any local contacts. Some of these places are too isolated to have them. But, oftentimes we'll bring everything in, or we'll send everything down. And, you have to know every detail of that job, because you can't just drive down the road and fix it. It has to be right the first time. So I think the more I get into my job, the more I realize that in every way I've become a lot more like detailed about every bed we make, every sofa we do, we make a lot of things, maybe more than the average designer, because of the sheer scale of some of these rooms. So we were talking about dining rooms. I mean, it's hard online to find a dining room table that's going to seat 12 people. They don't exist because you can't fit them on a truck. So we tend to make those, and sometimes even more so. I mean, sometimes it'll seat 18, an outdoor table. I mean, those are fun stuff to do. I love doing things like that where it's completely unexpected, but, you have to think of how to make it. And I enjoy that part of it. I do, because it's the craft side of it.
Yeah, well, I can understand that, and you have to have the resources and the staff, the contacts of all these different people who do these different things. Yeah, it's really interesting, and a super interesting market. So different than a lot of the other ones, because these homes are so big. And indoor space is different than when I lived in Seattle, and as you know from San Francisco and New York, it's not the same. And here it's a seamless transition in between. So that probably creates a lot of fun opportunities for you as well.
Well, and I think people don't realize, like, you can have all these outdoor seating. It's the same amount of furniture that's going inside your house, that's going outside of your house. And that, for people, creates some sort of sticker shock where they're like, really? Because it's not less money. I mean, good outdoor furniture has to be resilient, has to be made of teak, or has to be powder coated. It has to have, materials that go through several processes in indoor, outdoor. It's just crazy, So I've learned to kind of tell people, there's a lot of maintenance with this unless it's completely covered. And you've probably, anyone who lives in Arizona now knows that.
Oh yeah, you figure that out real quick, and you're right. It's shocking.
And then you start to think, how do I make those covered spaces and where's the sweet spot where I'm going to have it? Because otherwise you've got an amazing amount of upkeep.
Terrific insights for people. I really appreciate you sharing so much about, not just what's gone on in your business career, but your personal life and ways that you've thought about things differently, grown from those. I mean, really wonderful insights and advice for people around how to be an entrepreneur and how to be a continuous learner really through your time as you continued. And I've absolutely loved seeing everything you've been doing and appreciate everything you've done for me. Tell me, when you look back on your life, if you were going to speak to your 22-year-old self, 22-year-old Dana, what would you say to her if you could give her advice looking back?
Oh boy, let me think about that for a second. I think you have to be courageous and you have to be dedicated to your craft. Courageous in that, there's so many times where like things don't go your way. Somebody doesn't, they're on a different brainwave than you are. And courageous means believing in yourself. I mean, you really have to say, I believe in myself. I'm going to, get out there and put my best foot forward. And then secondarily, dedicated, meaning decide to do something and do it really well and study it. I mean, I'm constantly reading, looking at stuff online, getting books, listening to podcasts of my peers, joining a few things that made sense for me from a professional standpoint, getting peers in other markets who I can talk to so that I'm not in competition with them, but so I can learn what are they doing with contracts, what are they doing with, resources and sharing, because you can be very isolated as an entrepreneur. So I think, having those sources and relying on other people and some professional sources is super, super helpful.
I mean, just tremendous advice there for anyone, truthfully at all ages, right? Not just 22 looking back, but your advice is extraordinarily thoughtful but practical, right? All these moments you're talking about around networking, around learning, around courage, just tremendous. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I think there's so many wonderful things for people to gain and hopefully impact their lives as they're making decisions on their career and their life choices. So Dana, how can people find you, find the Refined Group out there on social media, or how can they get in contact with you?
Well, I think the best way is probably through Instagram at the Refined Group. And we post regularly, a couple times a week, and we try to show our new projects. And it's just a fun way to stay in touch. And you also get to know us a little better because we're trying to be ourselves on it,
Okay, terrific. Well, please, if anyone is interested in getting a hold of Dana, please do. The Refined Group is tremendous, 5 stars. And Dana, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I think it was a tremendous opportunity to hear from someone such as yourself with your experience and insights. So we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And I'm honored to have worked on your home. It's been just a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dana. All right. For those, please go online and like and subscribe, make a comment, and look for more episodes from the 2% Factor. Thank you.